A greedy millionaire evicts a family with nowhere to go. The truth about them leaves him trembling. In the heart of a bustling metropolis, the towering skyscrapers cast long shadows over the city streets. Among these monoliths of steel and glass stood the imposing headquarters of Blackthorne Enterprises, a testament to the wealth and power of its founder, Victor Blackthorne. Victor, a self-made millionaire, was known throughout the city for his ruthless business tactics and unrelenting ambition. He had built his empire on the backs of others, using manipulation and intimidation to crush his competitors and amass a fortune that was the envy of all who knew him. As he sat in his opulent office, his cold, calculating eyes surveyed the cityscape below. To Victor, the world was a chessboard, and everyone in it was merely a pawn to be manipulated for his own gain. He reveled in the power he wielded, the fear he instilled in those who dared to cross him. But even as he basked in his own success, Victor's mind was already racing with thoughts of his next conquest. He had his sights set on a prime piece of real estate, a modest apartment building that stood in the way of his grand vision for the future. And he would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. In a small, rundown apartment on the outskirts of the city, the Robinson family struggled to make ends meet. John Robinson, a hard-working factory worker, toiled tirelessly to provide for his wife, Sarah, and their two young children, Emily and Max. Despite the challenges they faced, the Robinsons were a close-knit family, bound together by love and a shared determination to overcome whatever obstacles life threw their way. They found joy in the simple things, in the laughter of their children and the warmth of their humble home. But their world was about to be turned upside down. One evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, a sharp knock at the door shattered the peaceful atmosphere. John, with a sense of unease, went to answer it, only to find a stern-faced man in a crisp suit standing on the other side. "Mr. Robinson," the man said, his voice devoid of emotion, "I am here on behalf of Blackthorne Enterprises. Your rent has been increased, effective immediately. If you cannot pay, you have 30 days to vacate the premises." John felt his heart sink as he stared at the eviction notice in his hand. He knew there was no way they could afford the new rent, not with the meager wages he earned at the factory. The future he had worked so hard to build for his family was crumbling before his eyes. Miles away, in a cozy suburban home, Sarah's sister, Olivia, sat at her computer, poring over a stack of documents. Olivia was a tenacious journalist, known for her unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth and exposing corruption wherever she found it. For months, she had been investigating Victor Blackthorne and his shady business dealings. She had heard whispers of his ruthless tactics, of the lives he had destroyed in his relentless pursuit of power. But proving it was another matter entirely. As she sifted through the papers on her desk, a name caught her eye: Robinson. With a sudden sense of dread, Olivia reached for her phone and dialed her sister's number. When Sarah answered, her voice trembling with fear and uncertainty, Olivia knew her worst suspicions had been confirmed. "Don't worry," Olivia said, her voice filled with determination. "We're going to fight this. Victor Blackthorne may think he can push people around, but he's about to learn that he's messed with the wrong family." Back at Blackthorne Enterprises, Victor was reveling in his latest triumph. The Robinson family was just the latest in a long line of tenants he had forced out of their homes, all in the name of progress and profit. But as he leaned back in his leather chair, a flicker of unease passed through him. He had heard rumors of a journalist poking around his business, asking questions that hit a little too close to home. He had dismissed it as nothing more than idle gossip, but now, in the quiet of his office, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Little did Victor know that Olivia was already hard at work, gathering evidence and building a case against him. She had reached out to her contacts in the city, to community organizers and housing advocates who had seen firsthand the devastation that Blackthorne Enterprises had wrought. Together, they began to formulate a plan, a way to expose Victor's misdeeds and bring him to justice. They knew it wouldn't be easy, that they were up against a man with vast resources and a ruthless determination to win at all costs. But they also knew that they had something Victor could never understand: the power of a community united in the face of adversity. And as they worked tirelessly into the night, they held on to the hope that, somehow, They would find a way to triumph over the darkness that threatened to engulf them all. As the eviction deadline loomed ever closer, the Robinson family found themselves in a state of desperation. John had searched tirelessly for a new place to live, but with their limited resources and the skyrocketing cost of housing in the city, their options were few and far between. Sarah, trying to stay strong for her children, spent her days packing up their meager belongings, unsure of where they would go or what the future would hold. She couldn't bear the thought of her family being torn apart, of her children growing up without the stability and security they deserved. Meanwhile, Olivia was working around the clock, piecing together the evidence she needed to take down Victor Blackthorne. She had uncovered a trail of shady business deals, of bribes and kickbacks that stretched back years. But she knew that to truly make a difference, she would need more than just a few scattered documents. She needed the support of the community, of the countless other families who had been victimized by Blackthorne Enterprises. And so, with a fierce determination, she set out to rally the troops, to build a movement that would shake the very foundations of Victor's empire. As word of the Robinson family's plight spread throughout the city, something remarkable began to happen. People from all walks of life, from all corners of the community, started to come together in a show of solidarity and support. There were the neighbors who offered to help the Robinsons move, who brought over home-cooked meals and words of encouragement. There were the local business owners who pitched in to cover the cost of a storage unit, so the family wouldn't have to part with their cherished possessions. And there were the activists and organizers, the ones who had been fighting for years to hold the likes of Victor Blackthorne accountable. They saw in the Robinsons a powerful symbol of the injustice they had been working to combat, and they rallied around the family with a fierce determination. Together, they began to plan a series of protests and demonstrations, a way to shine a light on the dark underbelly of the city's housing crisis. They knew it wouldn't be easy, that they were up against powerful forces with deep pockets and a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. But they also knew that they had something those forces could never match: the strength and resilience of a community united in the face of adversity. As the protests grew in size and intensity, Victor Blackthorne found himself increasingly on the defensive. He had always prided himself on his ability to control the narrative, to spin any situation to his advantage. But now, as he watched the crowds gathering outside his office, as he listened to the chants and demands for justice, he began to feel a sense of unease. He lashed out at his underlings, demanding that they find a way to quell the uprising. He threatened legal action against the organizers, against anyone who dared to stand in his way. But even as he raged and blustered, he knew that he was losing ground, that the tide of public opinion was turning against him. And then, just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, he received a call from his lawyer. Olivia had filed a lawsuit against Blackthorne Enterprises, alleging a pattern of fraud, corruption, and abuse. The evidence she had gathered was damning, and the media was already starting to take notice. For the first time in his life, Victor felt a sense of real fear. He had always believed himself to be untouchable, protected by his wealth and his power. But now, as he stared at the headlines and the mounting legal bills, he began to wonder if he had finally met his match. As the legal battle heated up, the Robinson family found themselves caught in the middle of a maelstrom. On one side was Victor Blackthorne, with his army of high-priced lawyers and his bottomless war chest. On the other was Olivia, armed with the truth and the support of a community that refused to be silenced. For Sarah and John, it was a surreal experience, watching their personal struggle become a flashpoint in a much larger fight. They had never asked to be at the center of attention, had never wanted anything more than to live their lives in peace and security. But as they watched the protests and the rallies, as they saw the outpouring of support from people they had never even met, they began to feel a sense of hope and pride. They realized that their story, their struggle, had become a symbol of something much larger, a rallying cry for all those who had been marginalized and oppressed by the powers that be. And so, even as they faced an uncertain future, even as they grappled with the weight of their own fears and doubts, the Robinsons held their heads high. They knew that they were not alone, that they had the strength of a community behind them. And they knew that, no matter what happened, they would never stop fighting for what was right. As the court case dragged on, Olivia found herself working harder than she ever had before. She spent long hours poring over documents and records, piecing together the intricate web of corruption that Victor Blackthorne had woven over the years. She interviewed witnesses and whistleblowers, people who had seen firsthand the toll that Blackthorne Enterprises had taken on the city and its most vulnerable residents. She built a case that was as airtight as it was damning, a case that laid bare the greed and callousness at the heart of Victor's empire. But even as she worked tirelessly to bring Victor to justice, Olivia knew that the real battle was being fought outside the courtroom. It was being fought in the streets and neighborhoods of the city, by the people who had come together to demand change, to fight for a better future for themselves and their children. And so, even as she spent her days buried in paperwork and legal briefs, Olivia made sure to stay connected to the community she was fighting for. She attended rallies and meetings, lent her voice and her platform to the cause. She knew that, in the end, it would be the strength and resilience of the people that would make the difference, that would turn the tide against the likes of Victor Blackthorne. As the trial approached, Victor Blackthorne found himself consumed by a sense of dread. He had always believed himself to be invincible, untouchable by the laws and norms that governed ordinary people. But now, as he sat in his office, surrounded by the trappings of his wealth and power, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything he had built was about to come crashing down around him. He lashed out at his lawyers, demanding that they find a way to make the case go away, to bury the evidence and silence the witnesses. But even as he raged and threatened, he knew that it was too late, that the truth had already been exposed for all the world to see. And then, just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, he received a phone call from his son. The young man, who had always been a disappointment to Victor, had been arrested for drug possession, caught up in the same web of corruption and decay that his father had helped to create. As Victor listened to his son's tearful pleas for help, as he realized the full extent of the damage he had done, he felt a sense of shame and regret wash over him. He knew that he had been wrong, that he had sacrificed everything that truly mattered in pursuit of his own selfish desires. And so, with a heavy heart, Victor made a decision. He would go to the authorities, would turn over everything he knew about the corruption and abuse that had plagued the city for so long. He would face the consequences of his actions, would accept whatever punishment the law saw fit to mete out. For the first time in his life, Victor Blackthorne would do the right thing, would try to make amends for the harm he had caused. And as he picked up the phone to make the call, he felt a sense of peace wash over him, a sense that, perhaps, it wasn't too late to start anew. The day of the trial arrived, and the city was abuzz with anticipation. The courtroom was packed to the rafters, with journalists and activists jostling for a spot in the gallery. Outside, crowds of protesters had gathered, their signs and chants a testament to the anger and frustration that had been building for so long. As Olivia took her seat at the prosecutor's table, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She had done everything she could to prepare for this moment, had worked tirelessly to build a case that would stand up to the most intense scrutiny. But even as she steeled herself for the battle ahead, she couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness and regret. She thought of all the lives that had been destroyed by Victor Blackthorne's greed and callousness, of all the families that had been torn apart and left to fend for themselves. She thought of the Robinsons, who had become like family to her over the course of their shared struggle. She thought of their courage and resilience, of the way they had refused to be broken by the forces that had sought to crush them. And as the judge gavelled the court to order, as the lawyers began their opening statements, Olivia knew that she was fighting not just for herself, but for all those who had been silenced and marginalized, for all those who had been left behind by a system that valued profit over people. She would not rest until justice had been served, until the truth had been brought to light. And she knew that, no matter what happened, she would always be proud to have stood on the side of the righteous. As the trial unfolded, the evidence against Victor Blackthorne began to mount. Witnesses took the stand, testifying to the years of corruption and abuse that had gone unchecked at Blackthorne Enterprises. Documents were entered into evidence, laying bare the intricate web of bribes and kickbacks that had allowed Victor to amass his fortune. But even as the case against him grew stronger, Victor remained defiant. He sat stone-faced in the defendant's chair, his eyes never leaving Olivia as she laid out the case against him. And then, in a moment that would go down in history, Victor took the stand in his own defense. He spoke of his humble beginnings, of the hard work and determination that had allowed him to rise to the top. He painted himself as a victim, a man who had been unfairly targeted by a vengeful media and a corrupt legal system. But as Olivia cross-examined him, as she pressed him on the inconsistencies and evasions in his testimony, Victor's facade began to crack. He grew agitated and defensive, his true nature starting to show through the cracks in his carefully crafted persona. And then, in a moment of stunning revelation, Victor broke down on the stand. He admitted to everything, to the years of corruption and abuse, to the lives he had destroyed in pursuit of his own selfish desires. As he spoke, the courtroom fell silent, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. And as Olivia watched, she felt a sense of vindication wash over her, a sense that, finally, the truth had been brought to light. Chapter 13. In the aftermath of the trial, the city was left to grapple with the fallout of Victor Blackthorne's crimes. The Robinson family, like so many others, struggled to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives, to find a way forward in a world that had been turned upside down. But even as they struggled, they found strength in each other, in the bonds of love and family that had sustained them through the darkest of times. They leaned on their neighbors and friends, on the community that had rallied around them in their hour of need. And as the weeks and months passed, as the city began to heal and rebuild, the Robinsons found themselves at the center of a new movement, a movement for justice and equality, for a future where no one would have to suffer the way they had. They spoke out at rallies and marches, lent their voices to the cause of affordable housing and tenants' rights. They became leaders in their community, inspiring others with their courage and resilience. And through it all, Olivia was there by their side, using her platform and her influence to amplify their message, to shine a light on the injustices that had been allowed to fester for so long. Together, they worked to build a better future, a future where everyone would have a place to call home, where no one would be left behind or forgotten. And as they looked out over the city they loved, they knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united in the strength of their shared purpose. Chapter 14. Years later, the city had undergone a remarkable transformation. The corruption and greed that had once plagued its streets had been largely rooted out, replaced by a new spirit of community and cooperation. The Robinson family had become a symbol of hope and resilience, their story inspiring countless others to stand up and fight for what was right. They had moved into a new home, one that was safe and affordable, and had become leaders in the movement for housing justice. Olivia had continued her work as a journalist, using her skills and her platform to expose wrongdoing and hold the powerful accountable. She had won numerous awards for her reporting, but more importantly, she had earned the trust and respect of the people she served. As for Victor Blackthorne, he had been sentenced to a lengthy prison term, his once mighty empire crumbling to dust. But even in his downfall, he had found a measure of redemption, using his time behind bars to reflect on his past and make amends for the harm he had caused. And now, as the city looked to the future, as a new generation of leaders emerged to take up the fight for justice and equality, the legacy of the Robinson family and all those who had stood with them lived on. They had shown that, even in the darkest of times, even in the face of the most powerful opposition, the strength of a community united could never be underestimated. And so, as the sun rose over the city, as the streets began to fill with the sounds of life and laughter, the people looked to the future with hope and determination, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They knew that, together, they could build a better world, a world where everyone would have the chance to thrive, to live with dignity and purpose. And they knew that, no matter what obstacles they might face, no matter what sacrifices they might be called upon to make, they would always have each other, always have the strength and resilience that had carried them through the darkest of times. For they were a community, a family, bound together by the unbreakable bonds of love and solidarity. And together, they would continue to fight for justice, to build a future worthy of their highest aspirations, to create a world where every person, no matter their background or circumstances, would have the opportunity to live a life of meaning and purpose. Sure, I can add 500 more words to the story. Here's the extended version. As the years turned into decades, the city continued to evolve and grow, shaped by the tireless efforts of those who had fought for change. The Robinson family remained at the forefront of the movement, their voices and their actions inspiring new generations to take up the cause of justice. Emily and Max, the Robinson children, grew into adulthood, each forging their own path in the world. Emily became a teacher, dedicating her life to educating and empowering young people from all walks of life. She taught them the lessons she had learned from her own family's struggles, the importance of standing up for what was right, even in the face of adversity. Max, meanwhile, followed in his Aunt Olivia's footsteps, becoming a journalist with a passion for uncovering the truth. He used his skills to investigate corruption and wrongdoing, to give voice to the voiceless and hold the powerful accountable. Together, the siblings worked to carry on the legacy of their parents, to build a world where everyone would have the chance to thrive, to live with dignity and purpose. As for John and Sarah, they continued to be pillars of their community, their love and compassion touching the lives of all those they met. They opened their home to those in need, providing a safe haven for families who had fallen on hard times. They also became mentors to a new generation of activists and organizers, sharing their wisdom and experience with those who sought to carry on the fight for justice. They taught them the power of perseverance, the importance of staying true to one's values, even in the face of adversity. And through it all, Olivia remained a constant presence, a guiding light for all those who looked to her for inspiration and guidance. She continued to use her platform to speak truth to power, to shine a light on the injustices that still plagued the world. She also became a mentor to young journalists, helping them to develop the skills and the courage to pursue the truth, no matter where it might lead. She taught them the importance of empathy, of listening to the stories of those who had been marginalized and oppressed. And as the years passed, as the city and the world continued to change, the legacy of the Robinson family and all those who had stood with them only grew stronger. Their story became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the power of a community united could never be underestimated. And so, as the sun set on another day, as the city bustled with the energy and vitality of a new generation, the people looked to the future with renewed hope and determination. They knew that the fight for justice was far from over, that there would always be new challenges to face, new obstacles to overcome. But they also knew that they had the strength and the resilience to meet those challenges head-on, to continue the work that had been started so many years ago. They knew that, as long as they had each other, as long as they remained true to the values that had guided them through the darkest of times, there was nothing they could not achieve. And so, with hearts full of love and minds full of purpose, they set out to build a world worthy of their highest aspirations, a world where every person, no matter their background or circumstances, would have the opportunity to live a life of meaning and joy. For they were more than just a community, more than just a movement. They were a family, bound together by the unbreakable bonds of hope and compassion. And together, they would continue to fight for justice, to build a future bright with possibility, to create a world where every person could reach for the stars and know that their dreams were within reach.